The alarm went off at exactly 5 a.m., slicing through the quiet darkness of the room. She stirred, groggy and unwilling to leave the warmth of the bed, but habit was stronger than exhaustion. The familiar robotic tone of Alexa's voice followed seconds later, but it didn't deliver the usual weather update or gentle greeting. Instead, it spoke her name. Good morning, her name. You have a new voicemail. That alone was odd. Her phone hadn't rung. No missed call notification. She reached for it on the nightstand and blinked at the screen. Nothing. No voicemail indicator. Frowning, she glanced at the sleek black device on the dresser. Had Alexa glitched? She muttered a tired command. Play voicemail. There was a pause, a faint crackle, then a voice filled the room. Hey, it's me. Look, I don't know if you're awake yet, but I can't stop thinking about last night. God, it was so risky, but it was perfect. I don't care what she thinks anymore. Let's meet again. Same place. You know the one. Her sister's voice. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. It was unmistakable, the tone, the casual intimacy, the subtle edge of satisfaction. As if what she'd done was not only deliberate but worth celebrating. Her stomach twisted. Her hand clenched into a fist against the sheets. For a split second, she hoped she was mistaken. That it was some weird, sick coincidence. A prank. Maybe someone using her sister's voice. But no. No one else called her husband, babe, with that particular lilt. I can't wait to see you again. Same time tomorrow. Don't forget. The message ended with a low laugh. The room was silent except for the steady tick of the wall clock. She stayed perfectly still, heart hammering, staring at the ceiling as if it might offer answers. Her mind scrambled to make sense of it. There had to be a mistake. Maybe it wasn't recent. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was meant for someone else. But no one else in her life matched those details. The voice was her sister's. The implication was clear. Her stomach churned. The coffee machine in the kitchen hummed to life on its programmed timer, but the scent made her nauseous. The betrayal was sharp, cutting, more visceral than she'd imagined such a thing could feel. She replayed the message in her head. Every word. Every laugh. The casual confidence of it, like either of them feared getting caught. Like either of them cared if they did. The ache in her chest wasn't just from her husband's disloyalty. It was the double wound of it being her sister. The one person meant to have your back when the rest of the world didn't. They'd shared childhood secrets, fought over clothes, navigated family drama together. And now this. How long? That was the next question clawing its way forward. How long had they been doing this behind her back? What nights had she spent alone while they made plans? What lies had she believed without question? The images formed unbidden. Her husband pulling away when she tried to kiss him. Claiming exhaustion, late meetings, phone calls he took in the garage. Her sister canceling plans last minute, sudden interest in things her husband liked, obscure films, bourbon tastings, early morning runs. It was all there. All the signs. Blinking neon warnings she'd ignored in favor of keeping the peace, believing the best, or perhaps simply not wanting to see what was right in front of her. She swallowed the lump in her throat. A small part of her wanted to delete the message, pretend she hadn't heard it, go back to sleep and pick up the shattered pieces later. But something colder and stronger pushed back. No. She wasn't going to let this slide into the background. She picked up her phone, still no notification showing. Strange. Did Alexa pull it from a deleted file? Was it a pocket dial saved on the cloud? A glitch? Didn't matter. What mattered was what it revealed. Her hands trembled, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. The numbness was too deep, a heavy, suffocating weight pressing down on her chest. She felt both nothing and everything at once. This was real. And it wasn't going away. For years, she'd accepted the distance in her marriage as normal. Told herself it was work stress, the monotony of routine, life's inevitable drift. She'd ignored the lack of tenderness, the empty conversations, the way he'd started treating her presence as a given, not a privilege. And her sister, she'd excused the sly remarks, the need to one-up, the jealousy veiled as concern. Told herself they were just siblings clashing like always. But now it was undeniable. A betrayal layered so thick it suffocated. She didn't know what she was going to do yet. Didn't have a plan. But she knew this. She wasn't going to let either of them continue like nothing happened. And she wasn't going to shrink herself to avoid uncomfortable truths. The clock struck 5:10 a.m. The day had barely begun, and already it felt like a lifetime had passed. She stood, legs unsteady but determined, and moved toward the dresser. She had things to do, answers to get. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what she'd find. Sleep never came. She lay in the dark, watching the room shift from black to the weak blue of early morning. The house was too quiet, the silence thick with unspoken truths. Every sound, the tick of the clock, the hum of the fridge, felt intrusive. Her mind played the voicemail again, over and over, dissecting every word, every pause, every careless laugh. She wasn't imagining it. It wasn't vague. It wasn't something that could be explained away. It was fact. She thought about the years. The marriage that started with so much promise. She remembered the vows, the speeches about forever, the endless talks about building a life together. The man who used to look at her like she was the only person in the world. And she remembered the slow fading of that gaze. How his eyes stopped lighting up when she walked in the room. How conversations turned into logistics. How affection became routine, then obligation. At first, she blamed life. Work stress, responsibilities, the exhaustion of adulthood. She convinced herself every couple went through it. That it would pass. That they'd find their way back. But they never did. The distance grew, and she learned to live inside it. Learned to stay busy, keep moving, avoid the quiet spaces where unhappiness lingered. Now it made sense. The unanswered questions, the cold nights, the excuses. She thought about the way he always kept his phone face down. The quick exits when it buzzed. The late meetings that didn't match the calendar. It wasn't work. It wasn't stress. It was her sister. That betrayal cut differently. A husband could be unfaithful, and it would hurt, but a sister, that was its own brand of violence. They shared blood. A lifetime of secrets. Memories of childhood sleepovers, whispered fears, and plans for the future. And somewhere along the way, jealousy curdled into sabotage. Looking back, she realized it wasn't sudden. The signs had been scattered through the years. The possessiveness disguised as protectiveness. The passive-aggressive comments about her marriage. The too friendly way her sister laughed at his jokes. She'd ignored them, unwilling to believe someone so close would ever cross that line. She thought about the night last month when her sister insisted on coming over for drinks. The way her husband had suddenly decided to stay up, pouring another round even after she'd excused herself to bed. She remembered the quiet hum of voices downstairs, low enough to be private, not low enough to be innocent. She told herself then that it was nothing. That they were family, and there was no reason to feel uneasy. She felt sick remembering it now. The weight of everything pressed down, but anger began to flicker beneath it. A different kind of heat. Not the desperate, pleading kind of pain, but something cold and sharp. She wasn't a fool. And she wouldn't stay quiet. She reached for her phone again, scrolling through old messages, hunting for clues she'd missed. The casual jokes. The emojis. The inside references she hadn't caught. It was all there. Not obvious, not incriminating on their own, but undeniable in hindsight. Texts from him claiming to be working late on nights her sister had posted selfies suspiciously near his office. Comments about a great dinner spot. Either of them mentioned to her. She pulled open old family group chats, noticing how her sister always asked when she'd be out of town. How she volunteered to drop by and keep him company. Or help out. It made her stomach turn. Grief sat heavy in her chest, but it wasn't grief for them. It was grief for herself. For the version of her who believed in them. Who trusted both of them enough to miss what was happening in plain sight. The easy option would be denial. Pretend it never happened. Keep the peace. But that was gone now. Too much damage, too much rot. She wouldn't spend the rest of her life playing the fool in a house built on lies. Her mind jumped to logistics. She'd need to confront them both. Separately? Together? She weighed the options. Imagined the faces they'd make. The lies they'd scramble to offer. She almost pitied how predictable it would be. The apologies, the excuses, the half-truths. She wasn't interested in apologies. The years she gave them, the loyalty, the sacrifices, none of it could be returned. She wouldn't ask for it. What she wanted now was clarity. An end to the lies. She needed to see them for who they were, stripped of pretenses. And then she'd leave them to each other. They deserved that misery. She got out of bed and began packing a small bag. Just essentials. She wasn't waiting to see how this played out. She didn't care what they had to say. The truth wasn't negotiable. Her silence hadn't protected her, it had enabled them. She wouldn't make that mistake again. Every item she packed felt like a small reclaiming. A piece of her old self she was taking back. The books she never had time to read because she was too busy fixing a marriage she didn't know was broken. The journal she stopped writing in when the words felt too heavy. Clothes she hadn't worn in months because there was no one left to notice. When the bag was full, she sat down, hands steady. No tears came. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The betrayal was too deep, too sharp for crying. It demanded action. She picked up her phone one last time, staring at the lock screen. A wedding photo she'd been meaning to replace for years. She deleted it. Replaced it with a blank screen. No reminders of people who didn't deserve her memory. Her thoughts were clear now. No begging, no second chances. When the confrontation came, it would be simple. She'd show them both exactly how it felt to be discarded. And when it was over, she wouldn't look back. The clock read 6:12 a.m. She was done waiting. The hours crawled by. She sat in the kitchen, staring at the untouched cup of coffee growing cold beside her. The house felt unfamiliar now, as if every object had become part of the deception. The pictures on the wall, the souvenirs from vacations they took when things still made sense, every memory felt counterfeit. A performance carefully maintained while everything real decayed beneath it. She wouldn't stay here another night. She thought about calling someone. A friend, a colleague, anyone to anchor her in the moment. But what would she say? That her husband and sister had been sneaking around behind her back while pretending to care? That for years she trusted two people who made a habit of betraying her? No. This was something she'd carry alone, at least until it was over. The urge to confront them burned hot and restless. But timing mattered. If she acted impulsively, they'd deny it, spin lies, make her doubt herself. She needed facts, the undeniable kind. She picked up her phone and opened the call logs. Nothing unusual there, though his last incoming call was listed at a strange hour, 1:47 a.m. No name. Just a number. She recognized it instantly. Her sister's. A tight, cold smile touched her lips. They weren't even careful anymore. She scrolled through his messages. Some deleted. But not all. A few scraps left behind by arrogance or oversight. A photo of a dimly lit bar, no caption. A message about missing someone, sent at 2 a.m. 3 nights ago. No recipient name, but the timing matched her sister's work shift. She took screenshots. Evidence mattered. It wasn't about getting them to admit it. It was about stripping away the performance. Leaving them exposed. No space left for lies. No wriggle room. She typed a message to her sister, "We need to talk. Now." No emojis. No softening language. Sent. Then one to him, "Come home early today. I have something for you." She wanted him nervous. Off balance. The minutes dragged. Her phone stayed silent. Typical. When she needed them, they were nowhere. When she didn't, they were all over her, pretending to care, pretending to listen. She'd let herself believe that was love once. That compromise and sacrifice were noble. That loyalty mattered. But loyalty meant nothing when it wasn't returned. She thought about the years she spent cleaning up their messes, smoothing over family arguments, defending them both when others questioned their actions. She'd been their shield, their buffer. And they'd repaid her by stabbing her in the back together. A wave of calm settled over her. A strange kind of clarity. This wasn't her loss. It was theirs. They'd betrayed the only person who genuinely wanted good for them. She wasn't broken. They were. Her phone buzzed. A reply. Her sister. What's going on? Is everything okay? The audacity. As if she didn't know exactly what this was about. As if she could feign innocence one more time and escape the consequences. It was almost pathetic. She didn't reply. The front door opened an hour later. Him. Early for once. Hair still damp from a rushed shower, face carefully arranged into a mask of casual indifference. The usual. She wondered if he'd rehearsed his excuses on the way over. Maybe practice some variation of "you're imagining things" or "it's not what you think." It didn't matter. She didn't let him speak. Just tossed her phone onto the table, the screenshots open, the voicemail queued up. The look on his face when the audio played was everything she expected. Not shock. Not horror. Resignation. Like a man caught in a game he thought he could win. "Don't bother lying," she said, voice steady. "It's over." His mouth worked for a second, but nothing came out. Good. No words would have mattered anyway. Another buzz. Her sister again. "Are you mad at me? What's going on?" Unbelievable. She must have expected him to run interference, to buy her more time. She wasn't getting it. She sent one reply, "Come here. Now." He tried to speak again. Something about how it didn't mean anything, how he was confused, how mistakes happen. She didn't listen. His voice was background noise now. Meaningless syllables spilling from a man who lost the right to be heard. She pointed to the door. He hesitated. Like maybe if he stayed long enough, she'd forgive him out of habit. Old patterns die hard. Not this time. He left. The silence felt clean. She gathered the papers on the table. Bills, appointment reminders, a list of groceries she no longer needed to buy. All of it trivial now. She shredded the grocery list first. A small rebellion. Then a pair of concert tickets he gave her 2 weeks ago, pretending they were for both of them when he knew he'd be busy. Probably with her. The knock at the door came fast. Desperate. Her sister. Opening it, she didn't bother inviting her in. Just stepped aside and let her see the phone on the table, the evidence plain as day. The color drained from her sister's face. Fake concern, weak apologies, hands clasped like a schoolgirl caught cheating on a test. She didn't speak either. They stared at each other for a long, loaded moment. A lifetime's worth of conversations passed silently between them. The trust broken, the memories tainted, the bond severed. Then, finally, she said it. "I know everything." Nothing else needed saying. The sister's face crumpled, some mix of guilt and entitlement flickering behind her eyes. Like she was sorry, but also annoyed to be caught. Typical. She left her standing there. No screaming. No dramatic scenes. Just a clean break. Back inside, she finished packing her bag. Took one last look at the house. Not out of sentiment, but to remember how this felt. So she'd never forget. Never ignore her instincts again. Never let loyalty blind her to cruelty. When she stepped out, the sun was climbing, the sky clean and indifferent. And she didn't look back. She booked a hotel room with no hesitation, no second guessing. Somewhere on the other side of the city, away from shared memories, away from people who thought they knew her. The silence inside felt different. Not heavy, not suffocating, clean. A space without lies. She dropped her bag on the chair and stood by the window, watching traffic move without pause, proof that life didn't stop for anyone's heartbreak. The world carried on, indifferent and relentless. And she would too. She thought about what came next. Not them. Not revenge. Not explanations. Herself. A future no longer tangled in other people's mess. For the first time in years, she had no one's expectations to meet, no roles to play. It was terrifying. And freeing. The instinct to call someone tugged at her again. But who? Most people in her life were tied to them. Family functions, couple friends, people who wouldn't know how to pick sides without making it worse. She wasn't about to hand over her pain to an audience for pity or gossip. She made a decision in that moment. No confessions. No long conversations trying to unpack what happened. No need to be understood by anyone else. She understood it. That was enough. She opened a notebook she found at the bottom of her bag, one she meant to start using months ago. The pages were clean, untouched. She picked up a pen and wrote one sentence at the top. I owe no one my silence. It felt good. Not dramatic, not for show. A quiet promise to herself. The next entry came easier. She listed the places she wanted to go. Nothing extravagant. A beach town 2 hours away. A bookstore she used to love. A hiking trail she abandoned after getting married because he wasn't into the outdoors. Small, ordinary things. But they felt like hers. She thought about divorce. The word didn't sting. It felt like a release. The end of a performance she'd been forced to carry for too long. There'd be paperwork, sure. Legal formalities. Maybe a few difficult conversations with extended family who thought they knew what a good marriage looked like. She didn't care. No one lived inside that house but her. No one saw the silences, the passive neglect, the cheap betrayals. Their opinions didn't matter. The urge to tell her story, not for sympathy but for closure, flickered in her mind. Not yet. Not today. Maybe someday, in her own words, on her terms. But not while the wound was fresh. She ordered food without asking what anyone else wanted. Ate it in bed. Watched a movie she picked because it was the kind of film she never got to watch without someone making a comment about it being too slow or too sad. It was neither. It was honest. She caught her reflection in the mirror and didn't look away this time. No makeup. Hair a mess. Eyes sharp. Not broken. Not tragic. Just done. The hotel bed was nothing special, but it was hers for the night. No one would crawl in smelling like perfume she didn't own. No one would turn away when she spoke. The emptiness was clean. Peaceful. In the quiet, memories surfaced. Not the good ones, those were tainted now. But the small, cruel moments. The time he told her she was overreacting for being upset about a forgotten anniversary. The way her sister joked about how he deserved someone who challenged him more. She let those moments surface, faced them, then let them go. They weren't hers to carry anymore. It wasn't about forgiving them. That wasn't necessary. It was about no longer letting them occupy space in her head. They weren't worth it. Sleep came easier than she expected. No nightmares, no restless tossing. Just a clean, dreamless dark. She woke before sunrise. The city outside was still asleep. A thin gray light creeping in through the curtains. And for the first time in years she felt light. The absence of expectation. The absence of lies. She packed up without rushing. Left a generous tip for the cleaning staff, a small act of kindness in a world that rarely offered it back. Booked another hotel for the next night, in another city. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not out of fear, because it wasn't their business anymore. As she drove out of the city, past familiar streets, past the house she refused to look at, a thought settled in her chest. Not a wish for revenge. Not even regret. Gratitude. Not for what they did, but for the clarity it forced her to claim. For the freedom disguised as devastation. The road stretched ahead, indifferent and endless. And for the first time, it felt like hers. The next city felt unfamiliar in the best way. No one knew her name, no one cared where she'd come from, and no one expected her to play a part she no longer wanted. She found a small apartment with a month-to-month lease. It wasn't much, faded paint, a drafty window, but it was hers. No shared closets, no photos of other people's faces, no space taken up by lies. She bought groceries she actually liked, arranged furniture in a way that made sense to her, and let the silence settle in without fear. The first few nights were strange. Not lonely, just quiet. The kind of quiet she hadn't realized she missed. No constant noise of someone else's schedule, no phone calls pretending everything was fine, no shallow conversations where words were chosen carefully to avoid the real ones that needed saying. Just the soft hum of a city going about its business, and the sound of her own breathing. She started walking in the mornings. Not for fitness, not for distraction, but because she wanted to see what the streets looked like before the world woke up. Cafes setting up tables, early deliveries arriving, strangers with their own stories crossing her path without expectation. No one asked about her past. No one cared who she'd once been. It felt clean. One morning, she passed a bookstore tucked between a laundromat and a bakery. The kind of place that still smelled like paper and ink. She stepped inside without thinking. It was quiet, dust motes floating in streaks of sunlight, shelves filled with forgotten titles. She bought a novel she'd loved in college, one she'd stopped reading because someone told her it was a waste of time. She read it cover to cover in 2 days, not because she had nothing else to do, but because she could. The absence of obligation made her notice small joys she'd overlooked before. The way rain sounded against the apartment windows. The weight of a warm mug in cold hands. The simplicity of choosing how to spend a Sunday without compromise. These things felt new, though they'd been there all along. She just hadn't been free enough to claim them. A letter arrived one evening. No return address, familiar handwriting. She almost didn't open it. Curiosity won. It was from him. The words were predictable. Regret, confusion, claims of love he'd somehow rediscovered too late. Lines about how things weren't what they seemed, how he made mistakes, how maybe they could fix it. She read it once, then dropped it in the trash. Not out of anger, but disinterest. His words held no weight now. A message followed the next day. Her sister. Apologizing. Excusing. A string of explanations about how it was a weak moment, how she never meant to hurt anyone, how families should find a way back to each other. She didn't reply. Some things didn't deserve answers. The temptation to confront them again surfaced now and then, sharp and fleeting. To demand the apologies owed. To force them to see what they'd done. But she realized that was giving them too much space in a life that no longer belonged to them. Silence was its own kind of justice. She focused on building new routines. Tried yoga. Hated it. Signed up for a pottery class, and while the bowl she made was lopsided and ugly, it sat on her windowsill anyway. Not because it was good, but because it existed. Proof that she could make things for no one but herself. Slowly, she began speaking to people who didn't know her history. A barista with kind eyes. A neighbor who offered extra tomatoes from her garden. A bookstore clerk who always recommended terrible romance novels but meant well. None of them asked what she'd run from, and none of them mattered enough yet to hurt her. It was exactly what she needed. The nights grew easier. She stopped waking in the middle of them, reaching for a presence that wasn't there. Stopped checking her phone for messages that never came. The absence of their voices in her life left room for her own. She wrote again. Not to explain, not to recount, but to mark small victories. A good cup of coffee. A day without thinking about them. A moment of peace in the middle of noise. She filled pages, not because it made the past vanish, but because it proved the future was hers to shape. One morning, standing on her tiny balcony, she realized something simple and undeniable. She didn't miss them. Not the husband she thought she loved, not the sister she believed she could trust, not the version of herself that accepted so little and called it loyalty. The pain wasn't gone, but it wasn't running the show anymore. It had become a scar. A mark of survival, not a symbol of defeat. The road ahead wasn't clean or certain. There'd be setbacks, lonely days, small heartbreaks. But it would be hers. Every decision, every misstep, every win. And she wouldn't trade that for anything. Months passed without her marking them. No anniversaries, no significant dates circled on a calendar, no reminders of who she was supposed to be. Life simplified itself. Mornings started with quiet. No alarms she didn't set herself, no disembodied voices speaking names that no longer mattered. The air in her apartment stayed clear of old shadows. She moved through each day making small, firm decisions. What to eat. Where to go. Who to speak to, or not. Every choice an act of reclaiming what she'd so long surrendered. There was no dramatic transformation. No grand gestures of self-reinvention. Just steady, unremarkable progress. She noticed her reflection more often, not to check for flaws but to confirm she was still here. The lines under her eyes from late nights reading, the small scar on her chin from childhood, the new brightness she hadn't seen in years. A face she recognized without resentment. Her work changed, too. She stopped avoiding difficult conversations, started setting boundaries. Refused to accept last-minute demands and unspoken expectations. The people who valued her adapted. The ones who didn't faded. She let them. Every time she said no, it became easier. Every time she stood up for herself without apology, it chipped away at the old habit of shrinking to make room for others. One afternoon, she sat at a park watching a group of strangers laugh together. It didn't make her feel excluded or bitter. She wasn't lonely. She didn't need to insert herself into places she didn't belong anymore. Solitude stopped being a punishment. It became a choice. Letters and messages from her past came less frequently. A birthday card from a distant cousin who hadn't heard. An email from a mutual friend pretending ignorance, fishing for details. She deleted them all. No response. No explanations owed. The idea of love, of trust, didn't frighten her, though it no longer came with naive expectations. If it showed up one day, fine. If it didn't, her life wouldn't feel incomplete. She understood now that the worst loneliness was being unseen by people who claimed to love you. She would never settle for that again. She built routines she looked forward to. Weekly visits to the bookstore, not for the new releases but for the old, forgotten titles. Long walks before sunset. A Sunday ritual of making a dish from a country she wanted to visit one day. None of it made her life extraordinary to anyone else. It made it hers. The old house was sold. She saw the listing by accident. New photos. Fresh paint over the memories. Different furniture in the rooms where betrayal had lingered. She felt nothing. No desire to revisit. No curiosity about who lived there now. That chapter was closed. Sealed. In moments of reflection, she acknowledged how easily she could have stayed. How tempting it would have been to believe the apologies, to accept the excuses, to fall back into the comfort of what was familiar. But comfort wasn't the same as happiness. Survival wasn't the same as living. She hadn't left because she stopped loving them. She left because she finally loved herself more. People around her noticed the difference without knowing why. The way she spoke with more certainty. The lightness in her step. A quiet confidence that came from surviving something meant to break her. They called it strength. She called it clarity. Advice found its way to her in odd forms. An older woman at the market telling her to always pick the ripest fruit for herself. A cab driver reminding her that nothing good happens by staying where you aren't wanted. She collected these pieces of accidental wisdom, holding them like charms against old habits. The pain dulled into something manageable. A memory, not a wound. Every scar she carried proved she was not someone who could be broken beyond repair. She never forgot what happened. She just stopped living there. When strangers asked about her past, she didn't flinch. She didn't lie. She told enough to satisfy curiosity, and withheld what wasn't theirs to carry. Her story belonged to her now, edited down to what mattered. Not what was done to her, but what she chose after. She understood what self-respect felt like in practice. Not a slogan, not a defiant speech, but a steady refusal to accept less than she deserved. It was in how she spent her time, the people she allowed close, the decisions made without seeking permission. She never sought revenge. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because it wasn't worth her peace. Let them carry the weight of their choices. She had no interest in being tethered to their regrets. One evening, sitting on her balcony with a cup of tea, she realized she hadn't thought of either of them in days. Not out of suppression, but because there was no space for them in this life she was building. A version of herself either of them would recognize, one they never deserved to know. She wasn't waiting for closure from them. She had written her own. And in doing so, left them behind for good.